Okay, so recently there was a beta launch for Sonic Racing CrossWorlds. I've not played it myself. I'm not a massive fan. I recognise the quality of the existing games, but you two, both of you, are massive fans of the previous racing games, and opinion is somewhat divided on the quality of the of this one based on the beta. I'm going to go to you first, John, because you really enjoyed it, right?
Mostly. So
Mostly, right?
I have to caution this a little bit, and I think Oliver more strongly feels this about it. But essentially, it's extremely chaotic, and that was the
It
issue.
is.
But I actually think this is a function of it being an online multiplayer game, and that does tend to happen in games like this. But I feel like in terms of the visual presentation, the core mechanics, and the way everything sort of came together in that sense, it's extremely promising, shall we say. And we know that some of, at least a chunk of the team that worked on the initial D racing games from Sega that are in Japanese arcades now was involved with this game as well, which also is very promising. So one of the new things they did, though, and this maybe feels a little bit scripted, is there's sort of portals where it almost feels like they're
Right.
trying to pull off the Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart style, like jumping between worlds thing. But what they do is, like, when a portal opens up and you transfer to that new world, it's actually showing a video of that world running at a lower frame rate than the game, and then you sort of like run through it and now you're in that world. So it's still fairly seamless, but it's just that lead up to it that felt a little bit off. But still, it's 60 FPS. The visuals looked very colorful and beautiful. I think the core handling is good. I like that they brought back the sort of like some elements of Transformed where you essentially take on different forms. You're not just racing on land. Sometimes you're in the water, sometimes you're flying, and that's cool. And they really know how to theme that well with the sort of like giving love to classic Sega, which is great. But it is admittedly, I did think that the multiplayer in this beta was a little bit too chaotic at times. I managed
Hmm.
to come in first place a few times, but also you could easily come much lower. Just the random nature of it. It's a bit like Mario Kart, but even more like crazy at this point, where there's just stuff happening all over the place, right? And I think that's kind of what turned you away from this a little bit, right, Oliver?
Yeah. I came away with somewhat mixed opinions on it, just because of how action-packed this beta was. There are a lot of weapons firing, a lot of vehicles colliding, a lot of hazards on track, vehicle transformations, and like John mentioned, those stage transformations. And the item drops are really, really frequent as well. People are always throwing items, and the items are super, super powerful. Like lots of really, really high-quality
Mm-hmm.
items there. At times, I kind of felt like I wasn't even really playing a game because of how chaotic everything was and how everything was just getting shuffled up in the order. Whereas with a title like Mario Kart multiplayer, I tend to feel like even though there is an element of randomness to it with the item drops, there is a high element of skill involved as well. And I wasn't getting that immediate feeling here. Now, obviously, this is an early sample of the game, right? But that was my initial impression. And there are also some moments in particular where they're constricting your movement, where the game might be pushing you towards the
Right.
center of a track before one of these stage transformations, or might be limiting the extent to which you can go left or right during an aerial section, and that makes the game feel a little bit more limited, a little bit more on rails. Sonic Racing Transformed had a lot of the same mechanics, like Sean mentioned, but your ability to move through each section of each stage was a little bit more freeform. You could bump into walls a little bit more easily. There was a little bit more kind of stakes in the handling here, and I wasn't feeling those stakes in the handling here. And there was one other big change in terms of the way the game is structured from Transformed, in my opinion, which is that the game seems very heavily stat and upgrade based.
Oh,
So you can
right.
select little bits of gear. You might have an item that allows you to collect rings at a greater distance, things like that. And then the cars and the characters all have stats with a heavy impact on gameplay. So, for instance, I was playing with Sonic initially because it seems like the default character of choice, right? And I had a lot of trouble making turns. Like my handling was not very responsive. And then I switched to the Amy character in a handling type car, and all of a sudden my car was like almost perfectly responsive. Like every turn I was making perfectly, and it was like I was glued to the track. It was really totally a big difference. So I had to kind of find a middle ground there with a non-handling type vehicle to try to get some balance there. So that is unusual as well. Most racing games tend to give you a little bit of play there, like in a Mario Kart title, a little bit of play there, but not as much of a divergence as I saw here, with like the handling stat in particular really dictating how you can play this game and how you can make turns. That was unusual to me as well. But ultimately, it's online multiplayer. I mean, you can throw in a lot of caveats. I'm really interested to see how this works in single player.
Yeah.
I think maybe with a lower frequency of item drops, maybe a little bit more of a relaxed handling model, potentially it could be a really good game. And of course, this is a beta. But I actually would expect this to come out in a reasonably soon time period here, because technically and polish-wise, it seemed like it was in pretty good shape. Graphically, I did look at this in a little bit more detail here, and it counts at 1080p in my counts. It's running at 60 FPS. Again, those are early figures. But that's the lay of the land at the moment. It does seem to be a locked 60 FPS in basically all the gameplay that I tested. It has simple environments, more basic lighting, and more basic assets. Like the beta was only 4 gigabytes in size, but it looks good. And of course, this is a game that's targeting a lot of platforms. We have the Switch, we have last generation platforms, current generation platforms, PC, all that good stuff.
I wonder if I'll Switch 2.
Yeah, possibly. I'd hope it would be on Switch 2 as well. That would be quite interesting. But yeah, I would be surprised if this comes out later than July or so. It seemed pretty polished to me and pretty much ready to go in terms of the gameplay. There were no major issues outside of like the just general issues that I have with the way that the game currently plays. There's no great issue with any kind of technical aspect, in my opinion. So yeah, I am still looking forward to this one, but I would like to see that single player gameplay, and I would like to see it actually work quite well in that single player context before I give it a stamp of approval.
Okay, I've just got one question. Maybe you can answer it, John. Has there been a in-universe explanation for the concept of Sonic requiring a car?
Oh, well, so handling a car requires a different set of skills, right? And it's a foregone conclusion that he would win on foot. So in order to have some fun and challenging others, he decided that, you know what, it's time to drive a go-kart. It's the same reason a human would drive a go-kart, with other people on the track. It's just a good old bit of cheeky fun.
Right. Okay.
For that lad.
But humans can't typically run faster than go-karts.
Well, I mean, Usain Bolt probably has enjoyed a round of go-karting once in a while, right? So
do you think he just wanted to rest up, maybe?
It could also be that, but it's, I mean, for him, it's just a game, he's just
right.
Gonna have a bit of fun.
It's just recreational leisure. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, fair enough. There's still, I don't know, what could I say? It still strikes me like a god requiring a starship in Star Trek 5. But
the one time they did it the other way was in Sonic R on the Sega Saturn. Where Sonic was a character that ran on foot, while many of the others had, I guess, vehicles and such, if I recall. What a game. Sonic R.